I have three stories to share with you all that have been top of mind for me lately. The first is the Gaza flotilla, which was the third attempt this year to bring food, medicine, goods that Israel has been refusing into the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Navy stormed 22 of the more than 50 flotilla boats attempting to deliver aid while they were in international waters. They used drones and communications jamming technology, and they fired rubber bullets at the activists. There have been reports of broken bones, hospitalizations, and I know that previous incidents had reports of sexual assault. I believe 168 members were taken to Crete, while 2 were abducted to Israel for questioning. While at sea, those 2 experienced severe violence and torture, and the other activists were zip-tied and made to kneel while the Israeli national anthem played. Since 2008, which was 2 years after Israel imposed a blockade on the Strip, only 2 boats have succeeded in actually delivering aid. So I'll leave this story with a question for now. What are we going to do differently? The next story, I don't have as much to say. We all know about the Epstein files, which reveal the simple truth that power is for abuse, often the abuse of the most vulnerable, and so it's no surprise that the most powerful have been the most prolific in their abuse. We also haven't seen any real consequences for those implicated, and my question for this story is, why would we expect that the ruling class will bend to us willingly? The third and last story I want to talk about is the latest update to the police shooting that took place in Trinidad earlier this year. So I made a video about it on this channel before, but in short, the police in Trinidad and Tobago have a long history of abuse and corruption and brutality, many such cases around the world. And in January, the police shot and killed a man named Joshua Samaru, firing 19 bullets into his car while he surrendered with his hands up. They claim, without evidence, since there was no gun or shell casings in the car, that he shot at them. His common-law wife, Kaya Seeley, was paralyzed by the shooting, as she was also in the car. And despite protests, the police officers involved weren't even suspended. In fact, they were given therapy, while the victim's family received no support. Resources continue to flow to police and politicians, and the government has continued to ramp up this campaign of disinformation, intimidation, and distraction, which is just exhausting the public. Right, the latest update is that while no police officers have been charged for killing Joshua Samaru, Kaya Seeley, his wife, now has warrants issued for her arrest. She now faces 3 counts of shooting with intent to cause grievous bodily harm against police officers, and they're accusing her of manslaughter, alleging that she killed Joshua Samaru during the incident, which goes completely against the very clear video footage of the incident that occurred. They are playing in our faces blatantly. Now, there are protests planned in response to this news, but my open questions for this story is, what are the protests for? To what end? What will this protest accomplish that hasn't already been accomplished? Are we trying to raise awareness because people are already aware? Are we appealing to the authorities because they have demonstrated repeatedly that they do not care? And this gets to the heart of why I'm even making this video. Aside from these 3 stories, protests around the world for police violence, genocide, government corruption, cost of living, all these things have been going on for some time now. Entire generations are stuck in arrested development. People are suffering from the cost of living crisis, from practical debt peonage, from unemployment, from social atomization, from an ongoing pandemic. Not to mention all the other evils that people are paying comparably less attention to. Sudan and Congo come to mind. And it's treated as business as usual. We deal with mass shootings, mass addiction crises, mass homelessness, mass poverty, mass death. Human life is worthless to those in charge. They do not care. The ruling class does not care. I saw a comment on my Patreon. They were talking about how there's been this return to office push despite the fact that people do not need to be in an office 8 hours a day, 5, 6 days a week. The ruling class does not care. They hate remote work because it helps us. They hate disabled people especially. They want us miserable. They want us commuting, consuming gas, buying stuff to soothe their discontent, paying rent for the commercial spaces they own. And as I would have mentioned in my last video on this channel, they want us working these bullshit jobs, even though they don't make sense and they're actively killing the planet. Also, just to be clear, yes, I'm using ruling class as shorthand, but obviously there is not like a singular ruling class, like secret puppet masters pulling the strings to accomplish their goals. There are many ruling classes, there are many interest groups within the ruling class, and sometimes their interests do align. But generally speaking, Their interests align towards certain ends. They maintain certain systems because they recognize that it benefits them, that it will advance their aims of greater wealth and greater power. They're not some ultra wise masterminds. They're just doing what makes sense to them with the resources and information that they have at their disposal. Also, positions of power tend to attract individuals with psychopathic or narcissistic traits, and once they're in those positions, the power itself can neurologically and psychologically diminish empathy and reshape authority toward the kind of detached, self serving behavior that we see so prominently in our leaders. What's also funny about the ruling class to me is that they're literally dooming themselves. Yes, they have their bunkers and stuff, but they are still staggeringly short-sighted. Like, yeah, everybody is to some extent short-sighted, conforming to the status quo, continuing to follow the rules of the system. But the ruling class is also going along with what they're used to. They're not visionaries, they're not thinking of anything beyond continuations or worsenings of the world that we already have. The one brilliance I would grant them, even though they kind of stumble into it, is that allowing superficial freedoms and proliferating mindless entertainment is a way more efficient way of controlling the masses than some kind of explicit dictatorship. Now, obviously, they still utilize the same tools of dictatorship that we consider bad under a dictatorship, but somehow treat as better under democracy. The stick is the stick, whether it's the people's stick or not, right? But they've given us just enough to have some wiggle room, it feels. I mean, I could post this rant on YouTube, and although I suspect that some of my videos have been hamstrung in some ways, that's just speculation. They could always point to the black box of the algorithm or audience interest and say, actually, it's, that's just what it is. But anyway, up to now, with as bad as things are getting, people are still distracted and people are still bought into their conditioning. So aside from informing you that the ruling class does not care, I also want to inform you that the ruling classes are not god emperors of June. Okay? They're not going to rule us for 3,500 years. They're just regular people with faces, names, addresses, the drill. And they're digging all of our graves. Not just our graves, but their graves too. And they're not alone in digging it because we are the ones helping them. And it is because we are the ones that are digging this grave that we can be the ones to break free. The ruling class can be defeated. We don't need their permission, and we don't need to go through their approved channels to make a change. We might not know everything about all their closed-door dealings, their conspiracies, their blackmails, whatever, but we have to be systemic in our analysis, not reactive. We don't need to obsess over their dealings to know that we need to fight back. You don't have to wait for another Epstein to arise, to come out to the woodwork. You need to stand up and be like, we are dismantling the systems that will enable such positions to exist in the first place, that will enable an Epstein to arise, that will enable a Trump to arise, that will enable an Obama, a Clinton, a Macron, a Farage, a Kamala Persad-Bissessar, a Narendra Modi, a Cecil Rhodes, a Leopold, a Hitler, a Washington, going all the way back. You had to push for a cultural transformation that is hostile to abuse and abusive ideologies. But a lot of people don't want to do that because they have their own pet positions of power that they want to cling to. Or they've been successfully conditioned into thinking it's either the end of the world or the eternity of their status quo. Our imaginations are so short, and it seems like short-form content on Hollywood remakes and AI slop are literally conspiring to kill off what's left of our critical thought and imaginative ability. Look outside your window, or look through the little black mirror that you have in your hand at all times, and recognize that this is what our ruling class has decided will be normal. So going back to the questions that I asked at the beginning, what are we going to do differently? Why would we expect the ruling class will bend to us willingly? And what are the protests for? To what end? Clearly, mass awareness isn't ending anything. Yes, trust in the state and its mainstream media is low, but where does that get us? What does that build? What does that result in? What does going and getting yourself beat up and arrested in a protest do besides causing harm, creating a spectacle, and funneling money into bail funds that feed into the state instead of durable infrastructure? I don't intend to answer these questions in this video. If you're interested in finding some answers, I make videos about what we can do differently on my main channel all the time. I'm not gonna reiterate them in this particular short video. But you can look into concepts of propose and oppose, build and fight, leverage and rupture, insurrection, erosion, development and prefiguration. Whatever you want to call it, We need to be more creative about where we push back instead of repeating the same tired scripts. We need infrastructure to secure a better way of being. We need to network the people and groups that already exist doing this work. We need to rethink strategies and tactics according to much more specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound goals. I obviously don't have all the answers, but the questions still need to be asked. People, we are up, okay? Yeah, some people are still asleep or half asleep, but we're up. We don't need to wake up again and again and again. Keep your eyes open. The ruling class does not care. They don't need our consent to govern or whatever other nonsense they sold you in social studies class. Withdraw your consent, but go beyond that. Shatter the veneer of legitimacy that this system continues to possess. Go beyond it. Following their rules will not set us free. And as always, all power to all the people. Peace.